Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to TMRP, the Metropolis Radio Podcast. Now, this week isn't going to be as news heavy as the prior week. In fact, I'm going to expand upon a topic that I talked about last week, and that really was the death of the Blockbuster. But before we get into that, what we're going to be discussing is all these other movies that have now been pushed back to 2021, because we got to set the stage for it. You can't make that bold of a claim that, it's the death of the Blockbuster without explaining it. And now, as a result of that, some theaters are closing and others are on the brink of bankruptcy. AMC. But we'll get into that. Now, what does this all mean for the movie industry at large? What does this mean in the meta? Is Premiere Video on Demand, otherwise known as PVOD, the future of the industry, or does this chain of events mark the death of the $100 to $200 million spectacle? So without further delay, let's just get right into it, and we're going to start off by talking about what other movies just got delayed from last week. Now, I feel like I just talked about No Time to Die, that was supposed to come out on November 20th. Well, it got moved again to April 2nd, 2021. So almost a full year from when it was originally supposed to come out in April 2020. And honestly, I had no expectations for Bond 25 being that good. I wasn't going to go see it in theaters anyway. I really didn't like Spectre. And Bond 25 for me just looked it's another Daniel Craig James Bond movie. Big deal, whatever. Dune also got pushed back from December 18, 2020 to October 1st, 2021. Almost an entire year. Now, I can see why Warner Brothers would want to push back Dune. It's for the same reason they probably should have pushed back Tenet, because honestly, the casual audience doesn't know what Dune is. Now, I know what Dune is because I've been a science fiction fan my entire life, but be honest with yourself, do you honestly know the plot of Dune off the top of your head? You probably don't. You're probably going to look at Dune and look at it as a Star Wars ripoff, and you wouldn't be wrong for that, even though Star Wars came long after Dune, but that's besides the point, and I'm tangenting for too long on Dune. I do have a full video review of the 1984 movie coming up pretty soon, should be dropping in November, so stay tuned for that one before I tangent for too long. Now let's get back to other movies that have been delayed, and the next one is Venom, Let There Be Carnage. That was originally supposed to come out on October 2nd of 2020. It's now been pushed back to June 25th, 2021, and also Morbius, the Living Vampire with Jared Leto, the other Sony Spider-Verse movie, was moved from July 31st, 2020 to March 19th, 2021. Now, with the Spider-Man movies, they have to release those within a certain amount of time. That way Sony can keep the rights to Spider-Man. So even if the movies straight up bomb, they still own those rights. Because if they don't release Venom or Morbius, now I don't know when. I think it's, they have to put them into production like 3 years after the prior movie came out. And it has to be released like 2 years after it's gone into production. Marvel gets all the rights back to Spider-Man. I think that's how it worked, but don't quote me on that. And the last big movie to get delayed was Top Gun Maverick got delayed yet again. It was originally scheduled to release this June of 2020, and then it was pushed to Christmas, December of 2020. Now it's scheduled for July 2nd, 2021. I mean, why not go all out and just put it on July 4th, 2021, with Top Gun, let's be honest, that was the best, recruitment film that the United States Navy ever produced. So July 4th, you get this, infusion of patriotism. It would have been perfect. Who cares if you missed the first couple of days? You can, market it as, it is premiering on July 4th because we are insanely patriotic, blah, 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 blah. But, to me, that's just a missed opportunity. So with all these movies getting delayed, these theaters are going to really, really start getting into trouble. And before we get into Regal, I actually want to talk about AMC first. Now, apparently AMC is losing liquidity. S&P Global reduced AMC's credit rating once again. Their credit rating was already reduced back in March when the pandemic hit. They had a credit rating of CCC+. Now it's at CCC-. due to the fact that they have very weak liquidity and a very bleak outlook. AMC is really burning through all of their cash reserves, all their cash on hand. And according to one analyst from S&P Global, AMC has maybe 6 months of liquidity left before they're going to have to start selling shit off. And S&P Global added that, quote, "The negative outlook reflects our view on that a default, distressed exchange, or redemption appears to be inevitable within 6 months, absent unanticipated significantly favorable changes in the issuer's circumstances." Now, Regal obviously came out and announced that they were closing down their theaters temporarily, and we'll get into that in just a minute. And then what does AMC immediately do? Oh, we're going to keep our theaters wide open. You know, how dare Regal please come in? We need money. And to me, I think AMC should have honestly closed their doors by this point, because here's the thing. If these movies keep getting delayed, and they have no new movies coming in, they're going to have to rely on catalog titles. They're going to keep burning through that cash because they have overhead, they have employees, and if they've only got about 6 months left, they're going to be running on fumes pretty soon. And don't be surprised if if we actually see AMC just go all out and have to file for bankruptcy because they have no other choice. And honestly, a lot of this was the coronavirus bullshit did not help AMC in the slightest, but it was not the cause of AMC's problems or the movie theater's problems at large. If I were to try to go into all of the problems that the theaters have been facing for the past 20 years, and AMC especially, we would probably be here for the next 45 minutes. I don't want to do that, but there's probably plenty of videos up on, the YouTubes and the BitChutes of the world that, chronicle all the problems. I really highly recommend you all check them out. So I've been talking about it for quite a while. Let's just jump right into Regal. It's actually Cineworld, their parent company of Regal Cinemas, announced that they would be closing all theaters temporarily. And they will temporarily shutter more than 500 theaters in the US and 127 in the UK. And just recently, the CEO basically came out and said why they were closed. And that's basically because all these blockbuster movies keep getting delayed. And the quote from the MSNBC article is, quote, "We are now like a kind of grocery shop that have no food to sell." And honestly, he honestly has a point. And, this whole, movies getting delayed is not the fault of the theaters by any stretch of the imagination. They're just the unfortunate souls that got caught in the crossfire between all of these governor shutdowns and studios not wanting to release their movies because, oh my God, we got to make $1 billion. Otherwise we're going to be out of business, blah, 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 blah. And movie studios honestly could have saved the theaters themselves had they just taken a hit at the box office, because the studios and theaters have a symbiotic relationship. One cannot exist without the other. Do you think Avengers Endgame makes over $2 billion in just home video or premiere on demand sales alone? No fucking way. You wouldn't generate that many sales unless if you get asses in seats, which the movie theaters provide. And honestly, the theaters need the foot traffic from the summer blockbuster season to carry them for the rest of the year usually. So what Cineworld is actually doing, I actually say it's rather smart. I was on the the all-new Mega Podtastic podcast recently. We brought this up very briefly, and I do have to disagree with Crazy Joe because he made the comment that that Regal is making too early of a judgment call. I think this was the smartest thing for them to do because now they're going into pure conservation mode. So now when the movies start getting re-released, when these blockbusters that were supposed to come out in 2020 are coming out in 2021, they are now more than prepared to handle it, and they're not going to be as strapped for cash as people like AMC or Cinemark are when they're making the claim that, oh, it's okay, children, we're going to remain open despite the fact that nothing is coming out. Please spend money here so we don't have to go into bankruptcy, blah, 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 blah. And honestly, I think this moment in history is going to be looked back upon as the death of the blockbuster. Now, this is what I've been leading up to throughout this episode, and I said this in the introduction, but what do I mean by a blockbuster movie? And how I define a blockbuster movie is those are your $1 to $200 million movies, your $1 to $200 million spectacles. Think your MCU movies, your Star Warses, your Ghostbusters 2016s, Ocean's 8, so on and so on. And let's all be honest here, the budgets on these movies were really getting out of hand. Did Terminator Dark Fate really need a budget of $185 million to get made? Or could they have cut it down quite significantly? They probably could have cut it down quite significantly. In fact, and this leads to the next problem, in that actors just simply now want too much money. And the perfect example of that movie was The Other Guys. It was a comedy made in 2010. Keep in mind, it's a comedy, but they needed a budget of $100 million. Why? It was reported at the time that at least 50% of the production budget for The Other Guys went directly to pay Mark Wahlberg and Will Ferrell's salaries on that movie. So Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg got $25 million to be in the movie, and that's all they were. And The Other Guys didn't even make its budget back in the theaters at the time. I think it only grossed about $170 million last time I checked. So the movie actually lost money. Had the budget been down, where a comedy is supposed to be, around $40-50 million, The Other Guys would have been a smash hit. But no, we want to get Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg, and they want $20 million a movie. And we better pay it because name recognition. And honestly, the progression of filmmaking technology, and I see where this is going, where, they need $100 to $200 million, budgets because of all these spectacles and special effects are getting more expensive. The progression of technology is supposed to make things cheaper in the long run, theoretically, not more expensive as it goes on. And honestly, the $40 to $90 million movies, where are they now? Well, they sure as shit aren't going to the theaters anymore. No, those movies are now being made by Netflix, Amazon, Apple, and perfect examples of that are Extraction, that had a budget of $65 million. The movie Bright with, what's his nuts? Will Smith, the David Ayer movie, had a budget of $90 million. And The Highwaymen with Kevin Costner and Woody Harrelson had a budget of $49 million. And the latest Tom Hanks movie, that was Greyhound, went over to Apple TV Plus. And we just talked last week about the Russo brothers' new movie, Cherry, is going straight to Apple TV Plus because when the Russo brothers released their middle market movie 21 Bridges in theaters, it barely made any money back at the time. So it was probably better that they just go directly to a streaming service. And I can't remember who said it, but I made this point last week that somebody had said that the one thing that Hollywood is going to come to regret is allowing that middle market to die. And that middle market is the $40 to $90 million movie. And here's the problem with the economics of those blockbusters, the $1 to $200 million spectacle. Those movies need to make either near or exactly $1 billion at the box office in the box office just to break even on the budgets. I really hate to break this to you, but not every movie you're going to produce is going to be $1 billion movie. And a perfect example, I just brought this up. Ghostbusters 2016. Sony lost quite a bit of money on that movie. They lost about what? $120 million. Paramount lost about the same amount of money on Terminator Dark Fate. Sony, when they did the Total Recall reboot, lost about the same amount of money on that, about $120 million. So, if one or two of these big movies fail, I mean, that could really spell, like now you're facing, bankruptcy here. So why didn't you just take that $150-200 million budget and invest it in like 5 or 10 smaller movies? Because then the chances of your ROI, return on investment, is way higher. You'll probably get a much higher ROI than anything, but no, let's put all our eggs into one basket and hope and pray to God it doesn't crack. Now, removing the middle market and only producing $20 million movies, that's about what John Wick was made for. I know the sequels got more money, but at least the first movie was a $20 million movie. But getting back to it, so if you're only producing $20 million movies or $200 million movies with absolutely no in between, that is not the mark of a healthy industry. That is the mark of a dying industry. You know, if you need to make more and more, if you need to make $1 billion per movie to stay afloat, well then you don't have much of an industry to begin with. And honestly, what the theaters should have done is they should have leveraged their power within that symbiotic relationship and gotten the studios to shrink their budgets over time. Because look, we can't keep increasing ticket prices if they're going to keep increasing these budgets, because the movie theater attending audience has been going down for the last 20 years. And coincidentally, the average ticket price has only been going up. It's never come back down. So seeing a movie make $1 billion today is not the same feat that it was, 20 years ago when, I was frequently going to the movie theaters. This was probably mid-2000s. I never spent more. I think the most amount of money I ever spent going to see a movie was like $6.50, and this was like a late afternoon showing. Nowadays, that's the price of a fucking matinee where I live. And I know matinees are insanely expensive in other areas. If you're looking at like Los Angeles and New York, fuck, I mean, what's the matinee there? It's got to be like $10 minimum. And I know if you want to go to a nighttime showing, I mean, you're looking at probably 20, 25, 30 bucks depending on where you live. I could be wrong and over exaggerating the numbers, but still, that's my point, and I would actually make the argument that Hollywood, and yes, I'm including the theaters in this, honestly did all the damage to themselves industry-wide. These billion-dollar movies being made from 2005 to 2020, because that's when you really started to see them. And I remember, I think it was Revenge of the Sith. I don't think made $1 billion, but it got pretty close. Phantom Menace back in 99 made $1 billion. That was a hell of a feat for 1999. And Revenge of the Sith made about 800 million. But let's be honest here. Oh my God, Beauty and the Beast makes $1 billion. Beauty and the Beast live action remake. What's another one? I think Aladdin made like 700 or 800 million in theaters. Star Wars movies make over $1 billion. Insert MCU movie here makes 1.2, 1.3 billion dollars. Let's be honest, that is not sustainable in the long run. Yes, in the short term, you have huge profits, but long term, like I said, if you're only making $200 million spectacles, and then on the low side, you're making $20 million movies with absolutely no in between, then you don't have much of an industry. And before I close this off, because I don't want to drag this on and on for longer than it needs to be, I honestly feel that the movie Avengers Endgame really marks the end of an era. That, you see it with Iron Man, you see it with the start of the whole MCU spectacle, and you end with a huge spectacle. And I think I read somewhere like Avengers Infinity War and Endgame costed like Marvel and Disney combined like $1 billion just to make. And Endgame is now, I think, the highest grossing movie of all time if you unadjust it for inflation. It still didn't beat Gone with the Wind. Gone with the Wind beats it by quite a few $100 million. But still, sorry for this rough transition, guys. I've been going almost 20 minutes straight, and I just needed to get a drink of water. But I think I was making a point about Avengers Endgame marking the end of an era. And how Marvel was... how it costed them nearly $1 billion, blah, 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 blah. There will never be another Avengers Endgame in terms of box office. We're going to have to wait a very, very long time for this. And honestly, I think this is going to save the industry more than hurt it. And I brought this up in the very, very beginning, but I just realized I brushed over it, and that is Premiere Video on Demand the future of the industry? Well, let's honestly look at, Mulan with PVOD on Disney Plus. Now, depending on which analyst you listen to, it either made as little as 30 to 35 million in PVOD sales, or it made just as much as 260 million in PVOD sales. And hang on for just a quick second. I'm going to look up exactly how much the budget was on Mulan. So, How about them Broncos? They're having a great season this year, aren't they? It's okay if you say that the Broncos suck, because I think that the Broncos fucking suck. Okay, just pull up the IMDb page for Mulan. Scrolling down, scrolling down, scrolling down. That was made on a that was a $200 million spectacle. And even IMDb is reporting the cumulative worldwide gross at just $66,800,000. Now that's probably not accounting for the PVOD sales, but still, let's give the high end. Let's give the $260 million from this analyst. You're only looking at a worldwide gross of just barely over $300 million. And like I just said, on a $100 to $200 million movie, you need to make almost $1 billion just to break even. And now Disney is actually branching out beyond the Disney Plus. I think now you can buy it on like Vudu and Movies Anywhere. And is it did Fandango buy out Flickster? I think so. I almost said Flickster. I almost just aged myself there. And that's the sad part. I'm 24 and I remember Flickster. Yeah, so the Premiere Video on Demand really only worked for one movie according to reports, and that was Trolls World Tour. And there was a reason why Trolls World Tour needed to be a digital release and not a theatrical release. Because if you remember Trolls, the first Trolls, hold on, I better make sure that I get this right. So I'm gonna look up the box office for the first Trolls movie that came out in 2016. Shouldn't be too difficult. It's right here. Okay, loading. Scrolling down. Change. Okay, it had a budget of $125 million, and the cumulative worldwide gross on that movie was $346,864,462. So it barely made its budget back in the theaters. And you know where Trolls actually found its audience? It wasn't until Trolls released on Netflix. And Trolls got so popular on Netflix that DreamWorks produced a holiday special for Trolls. They also did one for The Croods and one other, I can't remember, but Trolls was the largest segment for that holiday special. And even Netflix had that Trolls series that lasted, about 3 or 4 seasons? So if there was any movie to go straight to digital, straight to Premiere Video on Demand, it would be Trolls World Tour, given that that's where its audience was found. And the exhibitors at the time were coming out, and it's like, the exhibitors will not forget this. Well, if the studios are banking on Premiere Video on Demand as the future of their industry, well, then they need to cut their budgets down from $200 million down to more realistic numbers. And I'm talking, you need to be making movies anywhere from the $30 to $40 million mark, because the movie Knives Out, the Rian Johnson's newest movie, I think had a budget of around $40 million, and it grossed like $300 million at the time. Let me make sure, because I don't want to give incorrect figures. Let's see, Knives Out. Knives Out was produced on a budget of, $40 million and grossed over $300 million. Granted, that was in theaters. That, I think you could easily make on, Premiere Video on Demand. You're not going to make it in like 4 or 5 weeks in theaters. I mean, you're going to be looking at over the course of probably a few months. But still, if you get your budgets around $30 to $40 million and your PVOD sales are topping like a Trolls World Tour where it was over $100 million in 3 weeks, that could be insanely profitable for studios. But yeah, these $100 to $200 million movies, no way. You'd have to make, like I said, you have to make $1 billion just to break even on all the production costs, including all the marketing. It's not going to be sustainable in the long run. And guys, I've been going now for about 25 minutes, and I don't want to drag this out any further. I think I've made all the points that I need to be made, but I'm actually curious what you guys think. Do you guys think that, that the blockbusters are basically dead at this point? And let me end off with this. I don't think you're going to see the blockbuster genuinely go away, but I think you're going to see a very significantly reduced number of them. In fact, like I said, I think there was a report back in like 2017, 2018, and 2019 had so many blockbusters release that it was actually an average of one blockbuster was releasing every weekend at one point in the theaters. I think we all know that like one blockbuster a weekend cannot be sustained in the long run. Some have to lose money. And remember, the summer movie season was originally from like end of May to beginning of September. Now they're pushing that back into March, and now they want to push that back into February. You know, how's that really going to work out for them? Is it going to bring them a whole bunch of money like they want to? Or are the real numbers going to come out? Because once you give people too much choice, you know, let's be honest, you're going to go into analysis paralysis, and now you don't know what you want to watch because, oh, fuck, there's these, 10 movies coming out this month that I want to go see. Well, and I only have enough money to go see maybe 2 or 3 of them. What do I go see? Oh, fuck it, I'm just gonna wait for Redbox for them to release to Redbox. That way I can see all 10 of them, and I spend like a tenth of the price renting the DVD or Blu-ray from Redbox than I would go into theaters. Hey, thanks for saving me money there. So, like I said, before I drag it out, now I'm going to let you guys know where you can follow me. I do have a blog that I treat more like social media than anything. That is metropolisradio.blogspot.com. Link is in the description and the show notes. I am also on Twitter at Metropolis. That is capital M, lowercase E-T-R, capital O, lowercase B-E-L-I-S-K on Twitter at Metropolis. And while you guys are at it, subscribe to the YouTube channel and also subscribe to the BitChute channel if you genuinely enjoy the content. Now, it's a small click for you, but for a very, very small channel like mine, clicking the subscribe button actually genuinely helps out. So whenever you hear people basically go on like, make sure to leave a comment, leave a like, share it out, and don't forget to hit subscribe. You know, the big channels, it's really corny, but for the small channels, it actually gets their content pushed out to more people. So if you could do me that favor, if you genuinely enjoy the content, subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the BitChute channel, and if you want to keep up with everything Metropolis Radio, also follow the blog metropolisradio.blogspot.com. I will post there long before I post Twitter. That's going to conclude the TMRP for this week, guys, and I will see you next time.